Scott, how you doing?
All good, Gary. Thanks very much, mate.
No, we'd obviously had a wee chat outside. This is a pure interesting topic, and when you talk about what you do as a career, it's very much a Marmite thing of people want nothing to do with it, or people are morbidly curious.
Right.
So you're a funeral director.
Yep.
I mean, I've got to ask, is that what you wanted to do when you were at school, or what was the chat? Where did it start?
So growing up in the family business, I used to live, or my folks still live where the business is.
Right.
So I used to walk out, going to school in the morning, pass a hearse with a coffin in it, literally most mornings. So it was just sort of normal to me. I don't really know, I've never known any different, you know. And it wasn't until later on when I went to high school and used to tell people, and people were like, what do you mean?
Can imagine your mates.
So it was normal to me, and I think I always just thought like, that's what we'll do. My dad did it, my grandpa did it. I'm the 10th generation of my family to do it. So our family business is 200 years old, over 200 years old. It was when we sold it in 2011. So it was just normal to me. I never really thought any different. It was just that's what everybody did in my family. So I would do the same. I don't think there was ever a point when I thought I really want to do this. Yeah. But at the same time, there wasn't anything else. People always say to me, if you weren't doing this, what would you do? And the honest answer is I don't have a clue, because it was always just like, I'll just get into the family business.
Was it spoke about with your family when you were growing up that you were going to do it, or was it just a natural?
It was just a natural sort of thing. We did speak about it, but it was like, you know, I used to say to my dad when I think it was like third or fourth year, like, I'm going to leave school next year and come up for you. Right. And he was like, yeah, that's fine. So just kind of progressed for there.
It was just a natural way in.
Yep.
So obviously you're there, it's a family business, and you see parts of it growing up and you're comfortable. How much does that then change when you're in that environment and you're not just looking at that hearse, you're dealing with the start to finish?
It changes quite a bit. But again, it was probably for the initial period, it was sort of just, I was like, well, it's just normal. This is what everybody does. In my family, you know, and even like, I mean, I started off building the coffins. Right. So, I mean, I say building the coffins, not like a joiner. You know, coffins come as a shell, and then you have to put lining in them, you put handles on them. So I get £3 a coffin. Right. So at that point, all my pals had a paper round. So they were making maybe 15, 20 quid a week. I used to be able to do 3 coffins every day after school. So, you know, I was getting 45 quid a week, thinking I was loaded, you know, and everybody's like, so you get a paper round? Like, no, I build the coffins. Fuck like that. What do you mean? But to me, it was normal. It's just normal. Totally normal. So that was it. I started doing that. And then I left school when I was, this summer. I was in 5th year in the summer holidays. My dad said, right, come in and work for us. So we had about 7 or 8 people that worked in the business. Right. My dad, and I went in, not intentionally, but probably with the worst attitude in the world in terms of family names above the door. My dad's the boss. Yep. I took my laptop over and I basically sat for the whole summer and just messed about, didn't really do anything. And then the next year, I left school and I said, right, I'm going to come and work for you. My dad was like, nah. Oh, because of the summer before? I was like, what do you mean, sorry? And he's like, nah, you're not working for me. And I went, so, what's going on? And he said, look, last year, you sat here, you didn't do anything, you didn't muck in, you made no effort. And I kind of went, what are you talking about? And I went over to the house and I was like to my mum, you're going to need to speak to him because he's saying that he's not employing me. My mum's like that to me, listen, if I was him, I wouldn't employ you either. So that was a kind of the penny drop. Reality check. Point. Aye, absolutely. And my dad said to me, go and show me you've got a work ethic and then come back and talk to me. So I went away and I got a job as a valeter. During the week, at washing cars with a guy. Worked in my pal's car wash at the weekend, and I managed to get a job in British Gas, a call centre at night as well. So I basically had 3 jobs. So I did that for about 6 months, and then my dad went, right, learn your lesson kind of thing. Fair play to him. Listen, it's the best lesson I was ever taught. Best lesson I was ever taught, because then I went into the business and my dad sat me down and he went, in here, you'll never do anything that you can't do yourself, and you'll never tell him to do it, and you'll ask him to do something. And that's always stuck with me through my career. So I was like, now I look back on that, and without a doubt, that's the best lesson I was ever taught. Because there's so many people that would just bring you in and go, right, on you go, settle yourself down and start for the bottom or whatever. But the fact he's actually said to you, no. And because it's your own dad as well, you're like, hold on a minute. Exactly. And then it started. So the first job was washing the cars.
Right,
So that was like washing the hearses, washing the limousines, washing the private ambulance, and then gradually doing a wee bit more and a wee bit more. And then eventually getting to the point where I was involved with funerals, looking after deceased, bringing people into our care, so going out and removing people for hospitals and all these different things. But definitely starting for the ground and working my way up.
Do you think that was important for you, starting at that bottom rung and going through the kind of levels of it?
100%. So like traditionally a funeral director would be somebody who does everything.
Yep.
They would look after every aspect. So I can arrange a funeral, I can conduct a funeral, I can care for the deceased, not to the same extent that, embalming would do, which is obviously something we can talk about later. But everything pretty much that's involved in the process I can do out with the embalming side. Whereas nowadays there's more, the role's kind of more like a funeral conductor, where people come in and they just conduct funerals. They don't necessarily do everything. And that's largely down to how a lot of funeral businesses are run now, where there's different people in different areas. But for me, coming up and learning everything, I definitely put me in good stead and allowed me to do what I do now.
What was I'd imagine there's probably more than one, but what were the biggest challenges that you found as you kind of made your path through?
Being young, I think as well, because again, it's different now. But traditionally, I'm 33 now, but I've been doing it since I was 15. So being 15, 16 and getting into quite a sombre environment where somebody's lost somebody, so we're getting into a private home and, I looked 15, so we're about to take somebody's loved one away and the family are standing going, that's a wee boy.
Is that a trust thing, innit?
Aye, but it's that whole thing. And they would say, and then people would say, oh, he's part of the family, and it would break the ice a wee bit, but that's why I was there, because, I belong to the family that ran the business and that sort of thing. But that was definitely one of the big challenges, I think, when I started out. And then for me, I think just finding the balance where people, it's like we said, it's a Marmite thing. They're either really interested or people are totally freaked out by it, and they, they'll want to sit next to you. You tell them you're a funeral director. So that was a challenge as well, especially growing up. I still went out with my pals and did all the normal things that anybody else would do. For me as well, another challenge was being on call. I was on call for the first probably 7-8 years of my working life.
Just constant?
Pretty much every day. So, I could go out, but I couldn't drink. I'd need to stay reasonably local. Always need to make sure I've got a signal on the phone. And again, I went to my dad one day and said, can I not get some time off? And he was like, I was on call for 20 years. So come back to me and talk to them. It was a hard lessons, but again, grateful to be taught those lessons, because again, it's put me in good stead for where I'm at now.
And see as that kind of young guy as well, how do you, if you're in a house or an environment where people are saying, oh, that boy's too young or whatever, how do you mash your emotions to that? Because that can hurt as well, because you're obviously there to do a job and you've got a bit of pride about
100%.
what you do, but that must be a bit of a thing for you.
Doing the job and doing it right, so making sure that person's cared for. And then the family coming back in maybe and saying, or when they come into the office to arrange the funeral, which could be days later, come in and saying, can I just see which often happened, the people that came out to the house, the way they looked after dad, it was first class, we couldn't ask for any better. So that then gives you a bit of, right, okay, I must be doing something right. Kind of thing.
It just reaffirms what you're doing.
Absolutely.
What about from your personal experiences, is there anything that you can reflect on that highlights the importance of a funeral director?
I think that there's so many things, to be honest, but I'd say the main thing is understanding the importance of every detail. And something that's so minute to somebody else can be such a big thing for that family. So taking the time to listen and pick up on these things, you probably do. We're all guilty, and I say you're people in the funeral profession, underestimating the importance of the job that we do. We've got a huge group of staff. We've got over 60 full-time staff that work in the business now. And all in different areas, and they're probably all guilty of underestimating the importance of the job they do, whether it's something back a house that the family never see or never know about. But I think picking up on the wee things, it could be something as daft as picking up on somebody's favourite colour, and that's the colour of tie you wear the day of the funeral. And that brings somebody to tears because you've actually picked up on that, and it means so much to the family. So definitely picking up on the wee things and the wee details and understanding how important that is. Absolutely.
And it's the thing that when I started kind of sitting thinking about what I was going to ask you during this interview, and the thing that I kept coming back to when you're planning a funeral when you're going through all these arrangements with a family who are at the lowest point they'll ever be, probably. How do you work out what is the correct approach? Because obviously everybody's different, everybody reacts differently, but how do you try and tailor that from your point of view?
Well, it's like you just said, every life's unique, every person's unique, so a funeral's no different. And I think being able to read the room and understand the people that you're looking after and what they need. And some people will approach it very much as almost like a business transaction. You know, so it's a case of this has happened. They're very matter of fact about it. They want you to come in and they want to tell you exactly what they want, and it's your job to go away and make it happen, and that's it. Whereas other people or other families that we look after, you almost become part of the family. And you could be doing this for 2 weeks. It could be 2-3 weeks between somebody passing away and the funeral taking place. And even after the funeral, we're still there helping them, whether it's, you know, to do a memorial or something with the ashes maybe. If it's been a cremation, you know, you just don't know how the people are going to be. And I think you need to adapt your approach depending on what the family's needs are or the person's needs are. And just take, you know, as I say, assess each situation as it comes. And some people get comfort from you being more sort of almost business-like, you know, and it's a very professional relationship and nothing more. And then other people, you know, you might be on first name terms and, you know, you're going out to see them every other day, and even if it's just to check in and make sure they're all right, or they're phoning you to tell you they're all right, it just differs every time.
And do you find people probably look at the funeral director as the person that's professional and doesn't get emotional, and they're the kind of the strong person on that day? But from your point of view, that must be a hard balance, because obviously every funeral's emotional, but if, for example, it's like a kid or a young person or something, how do you manage that? Because it's, if anybody looking at a situation like that would find it hard and emotional to be on the outside looking in, but you're a part of that actual service. So how do you cope with that side of things?
I think, again, it's just through time. It becomes something you become better at in terms of managing those feelings and the emotions that you might get. And it's hard sometimes not to get involved's not the right word, but get kind of caught up in all that, because as I say, you can spend a number of weeks with a family and a family will maybe tell you, you know, you feel by the end that you might know the person as well as they did, you know. But when if it's somebody, like I find if it's somebody I know, or, you know, like you say, unfortunately we need to deal with children from time to time. It doesn't happen too often. But things like that's when it's really hard, I think, to even anybody who doesn't be affected by that or isn't affected by that, then you know, it's so hard not to get you understand the importance of what you do. And okay, if somebody is 90, they've had a good life, a full life, and they pass away peacefully at home, it's a bit easier to process that. It can still be sad and it can still be difficult. But it can be a celebration of life. But then if, like, say, you're dealing with maybe children, you know, the life's not even really begun. And you're helping the family plan a funeral. You know, again, the magnitude of that and what's actually going on in that situation. Sometimes it does get to you. But I think, you know, what I tell myself is that we're doing the best we can for that family. We're looking after the family in the best possible way that we can, and that's my main focus at that point. There used to be a saying that people used to say, "You're not important unless you're you're not important unless you're in the coffin." And that was an old saying in the funeral industry, but now I think it's totally different, because as much as we're caring for the person who's passed away, we're also looking after the family. You know, so you need to consider that as well. And there's feelings, emotions there that a time like that, when everybody's distressed and emotions are running high, you just don't know what you're getting into.
No, I can imagine. I'm trying to think of you as a young guy as well, trying to manage that, because it's, if you're not used to it and you're not used to being around that environment of people totally at their lowest ebb, it must be so hard.
I would go out with my pals and, you know, be full of daft carry on every weekend and do whatever we've done, but when it came to doing the job, it's always been the focus to be professional and you know, be there for people. And again, I think just through time that it almost becomes built in. And it becomes more natural. And when I think it's the same for MD that does the job for a long time. We see people who come and work with us that are maybe new to the profession, and initially they'll struggle with that. I think everybody does, and it's only natural. But through time, you get a better understanding of the job you're there to do. But sometimes the lines do cross over. They do. I
can imagine. And did you get to a point where your dad had kind of come back to you and said that's you're in a decent position now?
Well, what actually happened is my wife's gran passed away.
Right.
I'm trying to think, I think I would have been about 19, maybe 20 at the time. She wasn't my wife then, obviously,
Yeah.
but, and I'd said to my dad, like, can I conduct this funeral? Can I arrange this funeral? Because I'd never done that at that point. There's different sort of steps in the ladder in terms of, you know, the route to becoming a funeral director. There's different roles, and there's a sort of assistant role, or some people call it a funeral service operative, or FSO, funeral operative. It just depends what business, but that person's essentially doing the sort of initial duties where they're out in the ambulance, maybe collecting deceased, bringing people into care, driving on the funerals, but they're not actually sitting down in front of the families, arranging the funerals and then conducting the funerals on the day. So I'd been doing that up until that point, and I said, look, could I arrange and conduct this funeral? And my dad was like, aye, okay, on you go. And I didn't even have a frock coat or anything at that point, or a top hat. I had to borrow all his stuff. It was just a case of, right, on you go. And that was the first time I'd done that, and then that was the sort of start of my journey into being a trainee funeral director after that.
Did you feel pressure at that point?
Aye, especially when I woke up in the morning of the funeral and it was snowing. It was a complete whiteout, so I was already a bag of nerves as it was. And then I looked out the window and I was like, oh no, this can't be happening. So aye, but everything went well, thankfully.
I was going to say, at least when you do get to that point and it does go as well as it can go, you must then take a degree of confidence out of that going forward to be like, well, I can do this. I know I can do it now. Definitely,
and I think the more you do, I still get nervous every time before I do a funeral.
Even after this length
even
of time?
Now, I mean, I'm more kind of office based now, looking after the business overall, so I'm not out doing funerals as much, but every time I still get a wee bit nervous. Because I think I'm a bit of an overthinker, you know, so I'll sit and go, right, is this done? Is that done? It's all about planning, the fine details, as I say. So
which I suppose isn't a bad thing.
No, absolutely.
It keeps you sharp.
And the way funerals are now, I'm not saying they're more like weddings, but, you know, people are more specific about what they want. People do more different things now. You know, it's not as much a taboo thing as it was. So people do plan more of a celebration of life, rather than, there's still traditional people that it is just a funeral and that's it. But you've got to think all these things now.
100%. And from the point of view of, because it is a business, it's very much a niche business, but it is a business. But from your point of view, what have been your kind of, don't want to say highs and lows, but kind of points where you've felt really good about the business and points where it's maybe been a struggle?
I think for any family, when you know you've helped a family through the most difficult time, and I mean literally, it's not just me, loads of my colleagues have been in the same position. Families will come up to you after it and say, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't get through the past 3 weeks. I wouldn't have coped with that. And you do, there's no denying, you get a real, you know, I don't know, it's hard to put into words, but a good feeling with somebody coming and actually saying to you, and you get a better understanding of what you've done for that family, because it's a job, you know, so you do what you need to do. So I think that's probably, I don't know if high is the right word, but you know, that's a positive about the job when you're able to do that and help somebody through that difficult situation. Probably the lows are, as I say, either when it's somebody I know. You know, if it's somebody I know well, I've had to deal with that a few times, unfortunately, through my career. Or I've dealt with some situations where I've been involved in assisting with the recovery of remains for some quite major incidents across the city and different things that have happened throughout the years. And that's like, you know, there's pretty somber moments in that where you understanding the magnitude of what's happened or what's going on. You know, like being in an area in Glasgow where something happened and it's normally hustle and bustle full of people, and standing there with 300 plus emergency staff and being able to hear a pin drop, you know, I'll never forget that moment. You know, so things like that, there's been a few moments where you know, you understand what you're doing, but it's not always a positive, you know.
No. And see, from the point of view of you looking after people you know, as much as it's not something that is a good thing, but do you take a sense of pride in the fact that you're looking after them at that point, and it's you that's there with them as such?
Definitely. I think 100%. If they know, it's difficult at times. I dealt with something recently for a really close friend who lost somebody who, it was never a right time to lose anybody, but you know, it was somebody in the family who was really young, life was just starting for them. And that's probably something I've struggled with more than anything over the past, I don't know, for as long as I can remember actually. Somebody really close to you and seeing them go through, you know, the grieving process and dealing, grief's hard for anybody, but I think especially when it's not expected and, you know, as I say, when it's somebody young. So like I said, I find that a challenge. I do. I think anybody who does the job, dealing with them, they know if they don't, then it's part of it's human nature, you know.
How do you switch off? Because if you're on call constantly, and as you said, you've been out of these situations where you've had to go and recover bodies, etc., and it's probably things that you wouldn't think imaginable that you're then involved in, and you're dealing with it. But how do you then go home and park that? And
you know, I don't think, honestly, I've ever switched off. Yeah, I don't, because it's always been like, even now, the nature of the business, it's 24/7. Yeah, you know, so you don't ever get a chance really to switch off. I'm always thinking about it all the time. Yeah. I think it's hard to switch off at times, you know, and again, it's just about taking the positives when you can. Yeah. It's not to the point where I think doesn't affect my personal life or anything like that. Sacrificed a lot in terms of, you know, not doing things because of being on call, and you know, it's like if I've got something planned and I'm looking after a family, and the funeral's arranged for a day that I'm off, or I've got something on, then I'm coming in to do that funeral, look after the family. So, and again, that's just always the way it's been. But no, I don't think you ever really switch off properly.
And that's probably a level of sacrifice that people might struggle with that are new to the job.
Absolutely.
And they've not done it, and they've never been in that environment of, like you said yourself, you were in a call centre. Somebody come from a call centre to then into that would probably struggle
100%
with that switch.
And I think even people who, it's different maybe if people have had to plan a funeral before or they've been involved in that, but if they're not, to then go into working in that industry and understanding, like, you know, the intricate details, everything, you know, it's not really something you can hand over and pass on to somebody else. You know, if you spent weeks with a family or even days with them, you know, leading up to the funeral, working on the arrangements, and then going, oh, but listen, I'm going to get somebody else to come in and finish it. You know, it doesn't work.
No, and it's as you said, it's the small details, and it's something like that could then turn a situation. If they've been used to you for 3 weeks, and then somebody else comes in, it could just totally change you.
And it's back to all the things that you pick up. So when you're spending time with the family, you might not, you know, subconsciously you're picking these things up. You maybe don't notice, or it doesn't register at the time. But they're the sort of things that you can't pass on. Yeah. You know, so again, it's just so important to be there and be consistent.
Yeah, with the details.
Yeah, absolutely.
We spoke about this outside a wee bit. And from speaking to people that had messaged me when I said you were coming on, what, from your point of view, would you think are the biggest kind of misconceptions and myths about the industry? Because I'm sure you've heard
there's
hundreds of them.
There's loads. I get questions all the time from people about, like, does this happen? Does that happen? I think the first thing is people think I cut about with, you know, a top hat on all the time and a black cloak. It's not the case. No, I think it's like people always say, is it true that before MD gets cremated, they get taken out the coffin? I get asked that all the time. That's not the case. It's definitely not true.
I've never ever thought of that.
Aye. I get asked it all the time. Right. I'm trying to think what else. People always ask, oh, do bodies make noises? Does this happen? You know, there's all that sort of stuff. People can move after they pass away and all that. It's just crazy.
How do you get used to things like that though?
Again, I think it's just through length of time. Yeah. Honestly. And being around it, I've been around it my whole life. I literally know nothing else. So, but then there's people who work in our business that have been there. Like, some people have been there 30 years plus, and then other people have been there, you know, a year. I think even people who have been there after a year, through that length of time, if you stick it out for that long, and even a year, then you get, you know, it becomes normal. Yeah.
So I take it then, if you're coming into this industry and you're new to it, do you see a lot of people falling away in that first?
Absolutely.
6 months to a year?
I think recruitment's hard for any industry right now, or any line of business. It's really hard for us. Yeah. Because people come in now, and we do it in a sensitive way, and we do it in a dignified way, but we have to expose people early on to, you know, human remains and deceased people. You know, it's part of the job. And in any area of our business, the likelihood is, unless you work in admin or finance, you're going to be dealing with that at some point. And it's not for everybody. You know, not everybody can deal with it. So we try and do that early on as possible. And some people do. Somebody recently who was a funeral arranger. So their job specifically to, you know, deal with the families, arranging the funerals, help them, you know, the family make initial contact with this person. They would arrange the funeral, look after them throughout, right up until the day of the funeral. And they were really good. But then when it came to actually dealing with the other side of it, they just couldn't. They couldn't do it, and it isn't for everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, we find that a lot. People will come on and they're great, and then when it comes to that part, they drop off.
And do you ever see, from your point of view, being experienced, I don't want to say comfortable, but do you ever get used to that side of it? Do you ever completely get used to it?
I think you do. So like, there's not anything. I don't think there's anything that would shock me, and I would say that's probably the same for the majority of my colleagues as well, especially the people who work both front and back of house, you know, in the business.
Yeah.
We've all seen things, you know, and been exposed to things now that, you know, every now and then you'll get something, you go, wow, you know, but it's not to the point where it would shock you anymore. I don't think. I think you definitely do get used to it after a while. And I think doing it for any period of time, it's so varied. As I say, like, nobody dies the same way.
Yeah, exactly. You know?
So the things you see differ. So you get, you know, it doesn't take long for you to be exposed to a lot of stuff in the industry. So I think that makes it easier for people to get used to.
Yeah. And the thing, when we were talking about the kind of misconceptions and we were chatting outside about it, and it's something that I get loads of people that had said about it, and it seems very unfounded, but I think it sticks with a lot of people. Like, oh, it's about a kind of mercenary outfit and they charge all this money for doing all this stuff. And we touched on the whole pandemic, and it was like, they must have made so much money, but it isn't as cut and dried and as simple as that when you actually look at it from your point of view, running that business.
Absolutely. So I looked after another during the pandemic. I wasn't working where I work now. I didn't have my own business at that point either. And I looked after a smaller family business, and like many other funeral firms across the UK, we were almost forgotten about sort of emergency service, if you like, you know. So we were struggling to buy PPE right at the outset, and nobody could really tell us how COVID worked in terms of what the effect, the transmission rate was with deceased people. They couldn't say there wasn't anything, they couldn't say there was, and obviously everybody's got their own opinion of COVID. But at that point, I had my daughter in the house, so I wasn't taking any chances. You know, I didn't know what. Nobody really knew anything. So we were being cautious, but at the same time, you need to be dignified and respectful. Yeah, and it's still somebody's loved one who's passed away. You know, you're still got to care for them in the same manner, have the same respect. But we were buying PPE and it was getting taken off us by the government and rediverted to the NHS, which I get. You know, I totally understand. But people used to say, so many people still say, "Oh, funeral director, COVID. You must have been rubbing your hands," but it couldn't be further from the truth, because we had much more an outlay just to keep the business safe, you know, and keep the staff safe. And funerals were stripped back. So where there maybe would be additional revenue, you know, people weren't bothering upgrading coffins. They didn't have loads of limousines. They weren't having lots of flowers, because funerals for so long were, you know, stripped right back and reduced. I mean, I looked after a family, I know them, and I think the lady had like 11 kids, and at that point there was only 10 people allowed at the crematorium that this family were going to, so they had to pick one son or daughter not to go to the crematorium.
It's horrendous.
You know, so like things like that, nobody really, unless you experienced it, nobody saw that side of it. And we were also, we're the point of contact with everybody that's involved in a funeral. So whether it's the hotel you're going to afterwards, it's the florist, it could be the printer doing your orders of service, the minister or the priest that's taking the service, or the celebrant. We're the point of contact for the family. So anything that MD couldn't have, it was our job to tell the family that. So a lot of the time our staff were in the front line, they were at the brunt of, or the receiving end of a family's anger and upset, and rightfully so, because, you know, a funeral's hard enough and you can get what you want, never mind when you can't. So again, nobody really saw that side of it. And we were busy with funerals, but from a commercial aspect and a revenue aspect, we weren't any better off, but worse off, you know. Which then means it's harder for the business to keep the wheels turning and do what we do. And I think, like, you know, we're quite the organisation I work for is a large organisation. It's a family business. Very fortunate to be in the position I'm in there, because it's, you know, one of, if not the biggest independently owned family funeral business in Scotland now. But the ethos is always reinvesting in the business to allow us to provide the best possible level of care for the families. So, you know, there is a commercial side to it, but it's constantly about how can we do things better for the families, how can we improve things, and there's things that we do that other businesses don't do. And it could be simple things like, for example, every person that goes into one of our limousines gets what we call a care pack. It's just maybe a bag with some water, some mints, some tissues, a candle, you know, memorial seeds, something like that.
details, isn't it?
Yeah, wee things, but these are all things that, you know, these all it costs a lot of money to put all that together. So that's where we try and focus the reinvestment so that it's the best it can be for families.
And it's hard as well because essentially you're a business, so you want to be able to run as a successful business and be in a decent position, but the industry that you're in, you're not like a financial institution that can go, we made X, Y, and Z, because you would just be judged
100%.
immediately on it. So it must be hard from that point of view of trying to be successful, but trying to kind of do it under the radar.
Aye, it's not
your priority.
Nobody wants to profit from death.
Yeah,
is it? Like, and ultimately, that is the business that we're in terms of, you know, funerals. It's a numbers game, and when I say that, the success of your business is measured by how many funerals you do.
Yeah,
because if you do it right, then families will come back to you time and time again. If you do it wrong, you'll never work for the family again. You know, whereas if you do it right for the family, then you should look after that family forever.
Yeah.
And it's generally measured by how many funerals you do. So like our old family business, we had one office in Rutherglen, Burnside in Rutherglen, and we used to do upwards of 500 funerals a year, and that was a lot for one office, and that was down to whatever we did it right, and people knew that, so they trusted us and they came to us. But it's difficult to. It's like you say, you know, you can't say, well, we made this much this year and we're doing this and we're doing that, because it's not something that, you know, you want to shout about. It's not something that, it's not the purpose of the business. The purpose of the business is to help people. And if it becomes profitable along the way, then that allows us, like I say, to reinvest and improve the business every year. Yeah. But it's difficult to measure that and quantify it. And it's difficult to report that to everybody in the business as well, because it's not about that. Yeah, and
you're just waiting on the reaction that would come off the back of...
Absolutely. And you get people saying, like, you know, how can you afford to do this? Yeah, you must be, you know, but we've always worked off an ethos that our pricing structure, we're competitive, and we'll always help people. We've got various different options to suit all budgets, and most funeral providers in the UK are the same. Yeah, you know, I think everybody knows the cost of living crisis, and unfortunately that applies to funerals as well. You know, there's an increase in cost there, but we've tried to keep our costs down as much as possible so that we can help families.
And see, on that, obviously you've worked in the industry for a long time. How do you think it's evolved from when you were a young guy, and what do you see potentially changing in the future?
I think the biggest thing was when I first started, families would come in and it was like, you know, the funeral director would tell you what was happening. Yeah. So, you know, literally somebody would come in and say, right, my husband's passed away. And I'm not saying we, but, you know, the funeral director would say, right, okay, Mrs. Smith, well, you're probably looking at next Friday for a funeral. So we'll get everything sorted for you. And, you know, they would take the lead. Whereas now families come in, like they'll phone us up just to get information. Right. And they'll tell us that, you know, the funeral has to be a Friday, has to be at 11 o'clock in the morning. And it's not up for negotiation. That's what they want, and that's what they're having. It's fiercely competitive now as well, to the point where you'll get people who will come in and say, I've been to John Smith around the corner and he can do it for 500 quid less than you. What can you do? And I mean, that happens on a weekly basis.
That's a horrible situation to be in as well.
And again, because of the size and the scale that we operate on, you know, we can't always do that. If we can help somebody, then we absolutely will. The Scottish Government coined the phrase funeral poverty, and that's a real thing. You know, and it's something we're trying to combat. We've set up a community trust, and we've got, as I say, we've adapted all our packages to suit, I think, the current climate is the best way that I could put it. Still giving people a dignified service, but making it affordable and making sure people can still have what they want. But I've had scenarios where somebody will come in and say, I've got absolutely no money and I want X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And that could be £1,000 worth of flowers. Right. So it's about being able to have that conversation and speak to people properly and say, well, look, you don't need £1,000 worth of flowers to have a dignified funeral. We'll get you one big spray for the top of John's coffin, and that'll be £100. Yeah. You don't need all that, you know, and it's about how you deliver that. Yeah. So I think that's been a massive change, because people's perception of what is a dignified funeral and what isn't has changed completely. Yeah. Largely down to people see stuff on the TV, you know, they see big caskets, they see all these different things, and think that's what everybody needs to have.
Like a Hollywood type.
Aye, but it's not the case at all. Yeah. And I think people come in and they say, I want this, and this, and we go, we can do that, but there's a cost attached to that. And people go, what? Wait a minute. You know, I can't afford that, and it's as I say, it's about how you have the conversation. So people's expectations have changed massively. I would say over the past 10 years, and I think that will continue. People are doing, you know, like environmentally friendly funerals are becoming more of a thing. People, I think people's wants and needs just it's opening up now. And as I say, it's back to what I was saying earlier about it almost becoming a celebration of life. You know, sometimes the guys and girls that we've got will feel like they're planning weddings. Rather than funerals, you know, because you've got somebody coming to play guitar at the funeral or play a saxophone or all that stuff happens now, and it's not that there's anything wrong with that. If it's dignified and it's legal, then we'll help our family do it. Absolutely. Sometimes a family's view on what's dignified and what isn't maybe differs from ours, and that's where there can be a challenge sometimes with having that conversation as well. But definitely people's perception has changed massively, and that's the biggest challenge that we face.
Do you think the traditional funeral as it is just now will change much over the next 10, 20 years, or do you think it will retain that kind of...
I think there'll still be a certain degree of the, like, funerals are sort of area dependent, I would say, or area relative. So like people in Glasgow, it's a social acceptance thing. A funeral's a funeral. It's maybe similar to like in Ireland where it's a bit of a do. You know, and that's still respectful and all the rest of it, but that's very much a thing. So I don't think that'll change. There's a thing called direct cremation now, which is basically where families you can phone somebody up. It's a service that pretty much every funeral provider offers. There's no funeral, you know, so it's done with dignity and respect, but there's no funeral. So what will happen is the funeral director would go, collect the person who's passed away, care for them for a few days before the funeral. They'd be placed into a coffin and taken to the crematorium. There's no service, there's no music, there's no family in attendance, none of that. It's almost known as a body disposal service, and that's what it is. And everybody thought that was going to be a big thing because it was a cheaper alternative. But again, it's back to social acceptance. People don't want to not have the opportunity to say goodbye to their loved one. And I don't think that will change anytime soon. So I can't see it changing much. But as I say, what people do and what they deem is acceptable at a funeral, I think the scope for that's definitely, you know, getting wider.
Do you think there's you'll know from obviously being in this situation, but is there a high percentage of people that do the whole pre-plan thing and have it all mapped out and ready to go before it's even happened?
That's a big thing, and every year we see an increase on our business in terms of what we call pre-need and what's at need. So at need somebody walking in the door, phoning us up when somebody's passed away. Pre-need somebody who's got a plan, prepaid funeral plan, and it's all planned out. That side of the business just went through regulation. So there's stories online, you know, there's funeral directors in Scotland that have went to prison because what they were doing was taking money from people for a funeral plan, but there was no funeral plan. And then the person was passing away and the funeral wasn't paid for. So it's all became regulated. We've always worked with the same provider for our funeral plans, and it's all regulated, so there's no misappropriation of funds. The money's safe, but a lot of people do that now. And younger people, we're seeing a younger age group that are now saying, like, I want to plan my funeral. There's obviously the benefit financially doing that, but there's also the other side of it is actually having their wishes laid out. So, you know, there's no debate about what the person wants. And it also means the family that are arranging the funeral at the time when the person passes away, they know people can pick everything down to the music, the flowers, the hotel they're going back to, whether it's steak pie or, you know, you can go as far as that. So it's more and more a thing now.
And do you ever get situations where somebody has laid out all of that and then maybe a family member comes in and is like, no, I don't think they would want that? Like, how do you manage that situation? Because that's a delicate...
It is, and it's a bit of a grey area legally just now, because a funeral plan at the moment isn't legally binding in that sense. So somebody could say, I want to go to the Lynn crematorium, and the family say, no, I've got to Derby. We're not really in a position
to debate
that, because it's no different from a family walking in that don't have a plan, and they're looking after, you know, they're arranging the funeral for wee Mrs. Smith. We don't know if Mrs. Smith really did want to go to the Lynn or not, but if the family that are arranging the funeral say that's where we're going, then that's where we're going. So it's a bit of a grey area. We don't get it too often, thankfully. We have had that. I've had that a few times over the past few years where, like, a family, I obviously can't get into specifics, but they pretty much changed everything
from the original.
You know, and it was difficult because I had a feeling that it wouldn't have been given what was in the plan, it wouldn't have been what the person wanted. But again, it's not really to deliver that service, whatever it may be.
You're like in a middleman at that point.
So it's challenging.
See, this is it. the thing that gets to me is, see when I sit and think about planning stuff like that, you just get absolutely overclouded with fear and you switch off with that plan right away.
You do, but then there's other people who I've sat down and done a plan for, and they're absolutely buzzing about it, get a total sense of comfort from it, and they're like, oh, this is great. I spoke to somebody, it was about 2 or 3 months ago, and it's a lady I know quite well, and I've looked after a few funerals for her, and she always said to me, I want to sort my plan out. So I'd been saying, let me know and I'll come and see you. So I went to see her, and she was like to me after it, right, that's me, I'm going to book a holiday now. And she said, I've been wanting to book a holiday for ages, but I didn't want to go until I get this sorted. Yeah. And she's not an elderly lady, it's just, she's thinking ahead. Thinking ahead. So, but more and more people and younger people are doing it now as well.
How do you view death? Because you see it probably more often than a lot of people ever will.
It's funny, I tell this story about my grandpa, who, as I say, he, was a funeral director all his days, and he passed away, and everybody thought, his funeral was, I always remember his funeral being really busy because he was quite well known locally, and largely because of what he did.
Yeah.
And he said to my dad before he passed away, he said, when I go out, put me out bare arse, bare board. And my dad went, what do you mean? And he went, I want to go out bare arse, bare board the same way I came in. And he didn't want any frill, nothing fancy, no big elaborate funeral. It was just like a simple funeral. And that was because he had this view of, over the years, he'd developed this view that, in his opinion, the funeral or death wasn't a big thing. Whatever was happening after that, whatever he believed, but he didn't feel that was anything to focus on, and that was his approach. I don't really know how, I view it. I suppose it's kind of, again, you look at it through the lens of every life's different, every funeral's different just now. Yeah. But for me, I don't know, I don't fear death, because I know, I suppose you get a bit more accepting of the fact that it's a thing. Yeah. Like the minute you're born, the countdown's on. Yeah. Whatever your path is, whatever you believe, you don't believe, whether you're religious, you're non-religious, it's a fact. For the moment you're born, the countdown's on. If you get a good run, then good and well. You might not, but so I suppose I'm a bit matter of fact about it all. Yeah. But at the same time, then being respectful of people who have a different approach. Yeah. That's just part of the job.
Terrifies me. do you know? It's not as much, and you just said it there. I think the older you get, you become not comfortable, but accepting that it's part of life.
100%.
But I think, see, when I was like young, terrified.
I don't know. I think everybody's different. Yeah. Everybody's different in their view on it. And I think no matter what, no matter how much you plan, for a lot of people, it's still a shock whenever it happens. Even if we deal with a lot of what they call expected death, so somebody could be ill, or they could get to, they could be 100 odd and they've been in a care home for years, and the doctor's been saying for 2 years they're going to pass, but it still affects everybody in a different way. Yeah. And how we deal with that's just dependent on, as I say, the situation and whatever the family need at the time.
Most significant learning you've had from doing it?
I suppose it's maybe a bit of contradiction given what I just said, but having an understanding of how things can change so quickly. Doing as I kind of mentioned outside, I used to do the company that I worked for, or the company that bought our family business when we sold it. At the time, they had the contract for the police in the fiscal, and doing, getting into a lot of environments where a sudden death had occurred, and that could be a suicide, it could be a murder, and at that point, we're not there to have any interaction with the family. We're simply there on behalf of the police to take that deceased person away to the police mortuary. But being in some of those environments, and you get a feeling, you kind of go, something bad's happened here, or something's happened that shouldn't have happened. This isn't right. So I think doing that, it gave me a sense of maybe a better awareness of what goes on. I mean, we used to go out to maybe accidents or murders once every other week. And I was always amazed that half of them never made the paper or the news. You never heard anything of them. And you think there's a lot happens in Glasgow, but there's even more happens that people don't hear about. So again, just having probably a better awareness of what was actually going on in the world and how quickly, as I say, things can change. Yeah.
And I suppose you'd have been in the prime position of, you maybe see something in the news, or you read something, you'll be like, how did that go so wrong for that person so quick? But you must see that
100%. And you can almost, I used to sit and go, and again, not through from a caring angle, you know, sit and go, how did this happen? How did this person end up in this situation? I think as well, it was a real eye-opener doing that, seeing how some people lived.
Yeah.
Because you'd be getting into houses that, you know, I mean, we would get into houses sometimes where somebody had passed away and it was that long ago that the police would only guesstimate how long the person had been dead by how out of date the milk was in the fridge. And you think like that's, so nobody looked in on that person. Yeah. Christmas and New Year, it was always a busy time for the police work because there was people who would only get a visit because it was Christmas and because it was New Year. And sometimes like somebody could have passed away months before that. And you know, you think, sad to think that there's people out there that, you know, nobody's checking in on them for that long, not even a neighbour or anything. So I suppose there's that side of it as well where you get, it's a harsh reality of that actually happens. It happens more than people think.
Totally agree. Did you have, obviously you had your dad, but even now or when you first started out, was there anybody that you really looked up to during your whole kind of time in the industry, or people you'd go to for advice, or if you were struggling with something?
I think my dad definitely, he was like obviously the person that brought me in and showed me the ropes, as it were, and he showed me how to deal with people, and he had a very good approach and manner of dealing with people, and that was part of the reason why the family business was so successful in terms of being able to look after so many different families. So definitely him, and then I would say also my current boss, who's our chairman and the founder of our business, he's been doing it for 50 odd years now. And he's done a lot. But again, just his approach in business. You know, he's got a very entrepreneurial mindset. But again, his caring, compassion, the way he does things, that's why the business has grown to the size that it's grown to. That's why we're in the position that we're in. So yeah, there's a lot that he does. I would say he's definitely a good mentor and a role model in that sense. And he, you know, there isn't much that you could go to him about. Every now and then you'll get something that you'll come stuck at. You know, a family maybe asks for something really obscure or something unusual. You could be dealing with somebody being repatriated from Africa, for talking sake. And he could tell you all the paperwork you need, all the legal documents you need to go through, the different people you need to speak to, you know, and just rhyme it off like that. So things like that, you know, there's people that I can lean on now.
And I suppose with that, like you just said that there about the repatriation and stuff, you'll get people that will need to plan a funeral and everybody will be here and it'll be as straightforward as it can be, but you could also find yourself in situations where you're having to get a body home from somewhere, or you're sending a body, and again that's just more complications that people don't really know much about. And their worst time as well, there's no really any logical thinking from them.
No, there's not. And it's like, you know, I've done a few like burials at sea, things like that, you know, and there's a huge legal process that you need to go through, and the first time you deal with anything like that, you're just sitting going, what's going on here? And the thing is that families, 9 times out of 10, most people haven't planned a funeral before. Even if they have, it's been a distressed period in their life. They don't remember everything. So, you know, somebody, unless occasionally we get families who, you know, have funerals in quick succession, but it's unusual, you know. So somebody says, I planned my dad's funeral, but it was 15 years ago. So things have totally changed. So it's not, they will tell you what they want, but in terms of how you get from where you are to where you need to be with something like that, you're getting no help from the, and when I say no help, it's not the family's place to give you help, but you know, there isn't any step for a hint. It's a case of it's my job to make that happen, and that's all the family know. So you then need to go away, but there's always somebody we can speak to. And again, we've got different departments in the business that look after things like repatriation. So there's always somebody that I can, if I'm not sure, then I can phone and say, right, listen, this is the situation I've got. This is what the family want. How can we do it?
Shows you about how long you've been in it that you still get moments like that where you're like, absolutely, I'm not sure what to do with this.
No 2 days are the same. And every now and then a family will ask you for something totally obscure. It could be minute, it could be something massive. Like somebody asked me once, they didn't want a coffin. Right. And I'm kind of saying, like, so how are we going to get mum? And again, you're not saying it like this, but in my head I'm saying, like, so how are we going to get mum from, you know, the funeral home to the crematorium? And it's finding the way to have that conversation without upsetting anybody, without being insensitive. And the woman was like, well, we'll just wrap her up in a sheet. You know, but then again, there's all the legalities around it. You can't do that. So
does there always need to be a coffin?
Aye, absolutely. No crematorium or cemetery will accept, unless there's certain faith groups around the world where, not in Scotland, but I've heard the burials taking place. Not necessarily in a traditional coffin. Right. But in Scotland, then certainly crematorium, cemeteries, you would need to have a suitable, they deem it as a suitable container. It's a coffin. Right. You know, so there's loads of regulations and things like that, but again, people don't always understand that, and it's trying to say, you know, that's what we want, but there's a legal aspect around it where we can only do so much out of a family, can't control it,
and you've got to manage their emotions as well at the same time.
Yep. And you know, we look after different faith groups as well, so different faith groups maybe do funerals completely differently, as well. There's traditions in their culture that dictate things are done differently, but it all has to be done within Scottish law, so it's, again, finding the balance. Sometimes that's not quite you know, bang on, so it's finding a compromise that works for both.
It's not an easy job, but it sounds it, mate.
No, definitely not at times.
What's the best bit of advice you've had?
I think probably from my dad years ago, saying treat everybody as if they were your own. Yeah. So I remember him saying to me when, like, again, first started out, part of the job's dressing people. You know, so I'm watching my dad saying, right, okay, Mr. Smith, I'm just going to put your trousers on now and your shirt. Your family are coming to see you later. And I remember at the time being young and a bit naive and going, he's a crackpot. Yeah. You know, like, what's he doing? But then my dad said, listen, you don't know who's about, you don't know who's watching. He said, one day it'll be your relative that's lying here or your loved one. He said, you need to think of that. And that's always stuck with me. I would say that's probably, I apply that now to everything that I do. Yeah. You know, so it's trying to put yourself in that family's shoes. And that's where it comes back to what I was saying about something that's so minute. Yeah. You know, a tiny wee detail that a family saying, can you put a blue ribbon on? You know, it could have such a significant meaning to that family. So understanding, you know, don't underestimate any of the wee things. I did a funeral for a young girl that passed away years ago, and we were speaking to the family, and our favourite thing was rainbows. So I had went and got rainbow ties for me and the rest of the staff to wear on the day of the funeral. Right. And it was maybe like a week and a half since the wee girl passed to the funeral taking place. Yep. And we walked into the house, and our dad just looked at me and he looked at my tie. And at first I thought, you know, maybe I've overstepped the mark kind of thing, and he burst into tears. And he said, how did you know? And I said, look, I just picked up in the conversation that was something that was important. So, like, again, that's always stuck with me. So I think it's ears open all the time and just trying to listen, and anything you can do that's going to make a difference.
It's those small details.
100%.
And when you touched on it a wee bit there, when you're talking about your dad dressing someone and he's having that conversation, do you think now the job is more of a recognised career path for young kids? Because as we were saying out there, when you were young, you'd be embarrassed to be doing a job like that. You wouldn't want to tell him, but do you think that's changed now?
I think so now, again, because it's becoming more, as you say, it's more recognised, and it's the significance and the importance of it. You know, it's a huge thing to be able to help a family say goodbye and do it in the way that they want. And as I said outside, I remember I'm embarrassed now that I was embarrassed about it years ago. Because my pals would wind me up and say, go tell them what your work is. You know, and it's that whole thing. But yeah, I think so now. It's more, again, it's less of a taboo, so people have a bit more of an understanding. We get quite a lot of young people contact us. There's obviously a health and safety aspect around what people can and can't do. There's a dignity and respect aspect as well. So you can't just bring somebody in off the street and you know, let them walk around and see the place. But if there's people that are genuinely interested, then we try and help them get a foot in the door. It might not be with us, but give them a wee bit of experience to try and get them on their way. And more funeral firms are starting to do the same thing.
And see, from that, like if there's any kind of 16, 18-year-olds watching this, what advice would you give to them based on the fact that it is a tough industry? There's no way of getting around that, and you are going to be faced with things that you're not going to see in most other jobs. But what advice would you give to somebody in that position?
I think just trying to get your foot in the door, that's it, and get some experience and understand it, and always, if you can, start at the ground and work your way up. Because the more understanding you have of the, you know, for the ground up, that's the important stuff. So people, on average, we sort of try to work it out. People only see about 30% of what we actually do. You know, so even as a client, if you're my main client and my point of contact and the next of kin, you don't see everything that goes on behind the scenes, and it's all that stuff that's really important. And that's how, I mean, the industry's not regulated. You know, so you could go out tomorrow and open up a funeral directors and open your doors.
It's terrifying.
Exactly. You know, it is. And there's loads of, we don't comment on other people's practices, you know, but there's people out there that I know don't do things the way they should. There's no secret. And I mean, they're trying to put a bill through Parliament just now to get the industry regulated so that there is, you know, they're making moves towards that, but it's a while away before it actually comes in. But literally anybody could go out tomorrow and say, I'm going to open a funeral directors, and that's it. And they there's no laws protecting people. You know, they can go and collect your loved one from the hospital, you know, do this, do that, and take them to the crematorium, take them to the cemetery. So it's quite frightening, because again, a lot of people think, oh, you must be regulated, it must be this. It's not. Far from it. So
I never knew that.
Aye, that's why we invest. It's frustrating at times, because we invest heavily in our people, in terms of we've got all the right people in the right areas of the business. We've got the right facilities, state-of-the-art facilities. Our care suite, we can care for upwards of 60, 70 deceased at a time, all in the, you know, the most dignified and professional manner possible. But there's other funeral providers that don't have the same facilities. You know, we've got two full-time embalmers that are qualified with the BIE, which is the British Institute of Embalmers. Another one of my colleagues, she's just going through her training just now to become qualified. But there's other funeral firms that don't even have qualified people doing that job. And again, MD can do that job. If you're practically able to do that, there isn't any law or anything that says that you can't. So folk don't know that. You know.
And that, do you know, I was going to actually ask you that, because see, when you're dealing with families, or you're dealing with individuals, is there certain aspects of the process that they want to know specifically what's happening with? Because there probably is some people that have got fears in their mind about what happens when a person passes away. And from your point of view, what do you get asked?
So we get people say, I think it's either one or the other. They either don't want to know. Occasionally you get somebody middle of the road, but they either don't want to know, or they want to know all the specifics. Where's mum right now? What's happening? When's this happening? And then again, when you get to discussing the embalming, which is the hygienic treatment that takes place, it can be at times an invasive procedure, but the main result, or the aim of that, is to get dignity provided for the deceased and for anybody who's coming to pay their respects or have a viewing. It's a particular skill and it's a process, but it leads to a better result for the family, and hopefully comfort, and helps them, you know, best remember the person as they should be. It's trying to explain that and articulate that in a sensitive way, especially when somebody's grieving and they're upset. But the staff that we've got in there in the care suite, they look after the deceased throughout the whole journey. You know, so they'll do everything from that part of the process to shaving them if they need shaved, cutting their hair, painting their nails, dressing them, and then placing them into their coffin, making sure they're exactly as they should be. So we're fortunate in that sense, because we can, if a family really want to, we could bring one of the girls up, and they could say to the family, well, look, this is what I'm going to do for mum. And they see the person that's actually dealing with that and have a better understanding. I think they get a bit of comfort, you know. And the stuff that they do is, you know, it's unreal. They've made it possible when people have been brought into care who, with somebody a while ago who was quite a young person that passed away, and at that point, when on the initial assessment, a viewing wouldn't be possible. Sometimes we have to, we never tell a family no, we never say they can't, but we'd always advise them with their best interests at mind. And sometimes that means having to have a really difficult conversation when somebody really wants to see somebody.
You don't want that last image, do you?
No. And I'm talking, you know, again, I wouldn't give specifics, but people who are either due to the circumstances in which they've passed, or just through, you know, natural decomposition through time, unfortunately is a factor as well. And they've actually made it possible for somebody to be able to come and say goodbye to their loved one, when initially the first thought would have been no way. You know, so what having them on site and doing what they do, we can, if a family want and they're going to get comfort from that, then we could put one of the embalming team in front of them, and they can actually talk about what they're going to do and how they care for that person.
Which again, is those small details, isn't it?
Exactly.
You're putting a face to a name.
100%. And they maybe get a bit of comfort, and if that means that they maybe phone the family a couple of days later and say, just to let you know, everything's okay with dad, he's peaceful, you know, again, it gives the family great comfort.
No, that's huge. What about, do you feel the family line will continue?
Well, I'd like to think so. So I started my own funeral business, in sort of partnership with the firm that I work with just now, and the area that we've always been from, and where we've looked after families for well over 200 years now. And my main focus for that is to build something for my kids, my son and daughter. So I would love them to go into the business in some capacity. I wouldn't force it on them. It was never really forced upon me. It just, as I said earlier, it kind of naturally just became what happened. But if they, I'd love for them to go in it in some capacity.
Are they old enough to ask you anything about it yet? Or
so
my
daughter's 5, so
right.
she asked me, what does Daddy do? And I'll say to her, the easiest way to explain to her is I help people get into heaven.
Right.
Or I help put the stars in the sky.
Which is a nice way to look at it.
You know, and I thought that's the best way of doing it with her. So she'll say, like, at night, if we're out in the car or something, she'll go, oh, there's Grand Jean up in the sky, kind of thing. And she goes, did you help Grand Jean get there? And I say, I did. So for as long as she, you know, she's happy with that explanation, then I'll keep giving that explanation. But obviously there'll come a day when they'll have a better understanding of what I do. But I think it's, I don't hide them from what I do either. You know, they've been at the office. I've never, like, you know, I've never seen a deceased, I've never seen a coffin even, but I take them in sometimes and I tell them, you know, what each room's for and what we do, and try and give them a bit of an understanding of what it is.
But then that was your path.
Aye, absolutely.
Aye. Would you, obviously we've spoke about this, we spoke about ups and downs and different advice for people. Would you recommend it as a career based on what you've done?
Aye, 100%. And I think it can be that. It can be a career. It's much more than a job.
Yeah.
The people that we've got, again, I say it all the time, but the people that we've got working in our business, we're very fortunate because every single one of them is 110% committed to honestly looking after the families, whatever it may be, whether it's somebody that drives a limousine, somebody in the mortuary that, you know, is part of the care team, somebody even in the finance department who's helping a family, you know, come to an arrangement so that they can pay for the funeral. They're all 110% committed, and they're all, I think they see the value in what a career it could be for people. So definitely, I think more young people get involved in it, the better. There's more and more people expressing an interest in it now. But I would say, MD, if they're interested in it, do your best to get your foot in the door and give it a shot. Yeah.
Love it, mate. This has blew my mind. Honestly, I think it's good I think there'll be a lot of people who will watch this and maybe they maybe be sitting going, well, I've been thinking about planning a funeral for quite a while, but I've got some questions. Because some people might sit and go, they're daft questions. I don't want to pick up the phone and ask somebody.
That's always the first thing I'll say to a family. There's no such thing as a silly question. Yeah. Because everybody always says, oh, listen, I want to ask you this. It might be daft. There's no such thing as a daft question. There honestly isn't. And again, as I say, most people haven't planned a funeral before. If they have, it's been, you know, it's not something you do every week. Yeah. So it's just trying to put people's mind at ease and let them know that people ask us questions all the time. We don't know the answer to either, but it's a case of I don't know, but I'll go and find out for you. Yeah. You know.
Amazing, mate. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for having us on, mate.
Brilliant.